couldn't have guessed that we'd be talking about Colorado, Oregon as much as we have. It's Tuesday, and we are already big time previewing that game. Perloff thinks that Oregon could be tight. What do you think?
This is the game. Well, I feel like every week people are like, oh, this is the week Colorado's going to get exposed and Coach Prime's going to go down and all that. But it's a huge point spread, and it's really just a whole other level of quarterback that Colorado's got to face. Now, I'm really looking forward to seeing Bo Nix and Shedeur go head-to-head on the same field because, and I know, Perloff watches these games solely through NFL draft prospects, right? And which one's going to get drafted higher, and Shadeur's seen as first round guy now. But, if nothing else, it should be like we joke that the Pac-12 has become what the Big 12 used to be, all offense, no defense. And this could certainly be a game like that.
Well, Stu, we've been watching Bo Nix since you and I worked together at Sports Illustrated in 2005. I think he was a sophomore at the time.
On the cover.
How does he usually respond to listen, every game's different, but how does he usually respond to these big moments? I'm thinking about that really tough Georgia game, obviously, a lot of tough Georgia games, but he's been in some huge SEC battles. Do you think we see the best Bo Nix, or is it possible this spotlight gets to him?
It seems to me that at this point we can't even really look at the Auburn tenure because he's just such a different player now at Oregon. He performed very well in the big games last year. The thing that became a meme when he was at Auburn is he was just so roller coaster, right? He was, just when people started to get their hopes up there, he'd go out and have a clunker of a game, and that just hasn't been the case at Oregon. He's been that guy for the most part. He's been that guy week in, week out.
Stewart Mandel is joining us from The Athletic. I'm sorry.
No, I'd say it's an interesting draft. I think both these guys could be first-round picks, too. I know you don't like to project, but as far as first-round talent, it's very possible. Don't you guys think that we're watching two first-round quarterbacks on Saturday?
When I see, and it's only been 3 games, but from what I've seen of Shedeur Sanders, yes, he is definitely in that group. Everybody says Caleb, obviously, number 1, and then Drake May. And I don't know how locked in stone Drake May is as number 2 or not. You'd have to talk to some better draft experts than me. But yeah, I think Shadeur's, makes so many big time throws. The kind of guy that just puts his team on his back. Bo Nix, it's hard to say. He came back to school because I don't think he would have been a first round pick in this past draft. But now you're getting another year of film on him. One thing that's really stood out about him last year was how good he is on the deep ball. And I was a little worried coming into the season that they had such a good offensive line last year and they lost a lot of talent and experience off it. I thought, well, what if they can't protect him as well? But so far, at least through these first 3 games, that hasn't been an issue.
Stewart Mandel's joining us from The Athletic. You want to watch the show, come on in, youtube.com/CBS Sports Radio. Before we get to more games for the weekend, we got to ask you about what's going on with Mel Tucker and Michigan State. They sent him a notice of termination after he allegedly harassed an anti-sexual assault activist who was contracted to work with the football team. Brenda Tracy goes around the country talking to football programs and other programs about her own surviving a gang rape, and she's worked with a lot of football teams, and now this situation with Mel Tucker has gotten really, really messy. They're saying, Stu, that they intend to fire him because it's for conduct which constitutes moral turpitude. He brought public disrespect, contempt, or ridicule upon the university. They're not really even talking about alleged harassment. They're talking about just the reflection on the university. It stood out to me. Do you think that Michigan State is going to be able to terminate him for those reasons?
Well, obviously, I think everything changed for them once the story got out. There was going to be this hearing on October 5th and 6th, and I think they would have saw that through and it would have remained private. But then the story got out in USA Today, and we've been saying that before he actually officially got fired, and many of us would say his version of events, if you believe him at his word of the kind of the best case scenario, was still pretty bad.
Yeah.
And they laid it out, I thought, pretty well in that letter. I think, you saw Mel Tucker's response today. Clearly, once they actually go through the termination, he's going to sue them. He has $70 million on the line. And they're going to bet that, that what we what they wrote in that letter constitutes a violation of that clause in the contract. It's a very vague clause and there is a clause like that in pretty much every coach's contract. It kind of gives the school wide latitude to determine, what constitutes moral turpitude. But I think that's a pretty strong case. And also, I mean, maybe they end up settling for some reduced amount of money. They'll have to go through the whole process. But I figured once it came out publicly, and in particular, once Mel Tucker responded to the initial report, basically went like on attack against Michigan State and said, well, that's somebody who knows he's not coming back, and he's trying to get his side of the story out there, and he's probably going to sue them eventually.
Not to be cynical about this, but what is the sort of struggles with Michigan State football? How does that fit into all this? I mean, there are a lot of people who are saying, well, if the team was doing great, then maybe they would view the whole situation differently.
I think that's true with any of these coaches, that any coach that gets in trouble, if they're, Rick Pitino and their national championship Hall of Fame coach, it kind of magically goes away. And if it's a situation where, and in particular at Michigan State, where I think they gave him this huge contract based off basically 2/3 of a season, and then last year was disappointing, it's almost like a relief among Michigan State fans that they were able to get out of it. And it's impossible to say. But one thing, obviously, that you have to say with Michigan State is there have been so many scandals there recently, most notably Larry Nassar. And you said it best, Maggie. He is accused of sexually harassing a sexual assault awareness advocate. Just the optics of that are so mind-numbing that I do wonder if it wouldn't have mattered how he's doing on the field.
Yeah, Stewart, I mean, you cover college football for as long as you have. You've been around, you've covered some really crazy scandals. I mean, everything that's run a long spectrum and a wide spectrum of scandals. How stunning is this sort of fall from grace for Mel Tucker?
Bizarre. There's no other way to put it. I mean, in 2 years' time, less than 2 years' time, he went from everybody's hot coaching to, I mean, one of the reasons he got that big contract, if you remember, was the season when USC had already fired Clay Helton and was going to be hiring the next coach who ended up becoming Lincoln Riley. And Mel Tucker was rumored to be one of the candidates. So that's why they gave him that huge contract. So to go from, hey, this would be a great hire for USC, to out of a job 2 years later where he cost himself the job is astonishing.
Turning our attention to this weekend of college football, I mean, the games are ridiculous. One game I wanted to ask you about, Ohio State and Notre Dame. We have not really seen like a great Ohio State team so far this year. Is there a chance they put it all together? I feel like they're a totally different team than we've seen the last 3 years against what looks like a really great Notre Dame team. I kind of lean Notre Dame here, Stewart.
It definitely feels a lot different than, for instance, going into their game last year. I mean, Sam Hartman has changed the whole perception of Notre Dame. It's been so long since they had an elite quarterback. Brian Kelly won a lot of games there, where his best quarterback, I think, was that one season with Deshaun Kaiser, right? It was guys like Ian Book and Jack Cohn. And so in comes Sam Hartman, and for once, they have a quarterback who we think is comparable, if not better, to Ohio State's quarterback. That's a much different equation. Now, I do think Ohio State's defense is a lot better this year from what we've seen so far. So this will be a big test for Sam Hartman. But, I mean, I can honestly say it feels like a toss-up game. I would not have said that about an Ohio State-Notre Dame game anytime recently.
Stewart, the one game that you think has the biggest ramifications for the college football playoff, I mean, I think we can circle two for sure, which would be Florida State, Clemson, and also Alabama and Ole Miss.
Florida State, Clemson is a big one because after coming out of the LSU game week one, everybody started pointing to Florida State as a national championship contender. And Clemson obviously lost to Duke the next night, and we were all down on Clemson. So Florida State, a little bit of a scare against Boston College. Not a little bit, a lot of a scare last week against Boston College. This is the key game. And it's been a while since Florida State beat Clemson. But this time I think people are expecting them to beat Clemson. And, if they lose, now both those teams have a loss already. It kind of gives the ACC no margin for error.
Man, I watched that BC game, Stewart. Was that just an anomaly? How close? A couple calls go a different way. Florida State could have lost to Boston College. It makes me wonder. There are all these Big Ten games this weekend too. Is the ACC really on par with the SEC and the Big Ten right now? I know Florida State beat LSU, but that BC game made me nervous.
The SEC has really struggled this year.
Yeah.
In non-conference play. And of course, at the end of the season, if Georgia wins the national championship, nobody's going to remember that. But as a whole, the Pac-12 has had a much better start to the season than the SEC. I think the ACC has been better this year than they have been recently. The BC game was weird for Florida State. I mean, I think anytime you go on the road in conference, it's not really about style points. But they absolutely could have lost that game. And in fact, BC, I think, set a school record for penalties and still almost had a chance to win the game. So I'm curious to see. Also, if I'm Florida State, I'd be a little miffed at the schedule makers. Why are they playing back-to-back conference road games in the first month of the season? That means they've only played one home game so far because the LSU game was in Orlando.
But obviously the game with the biggest impact on the Final Four is Colorado-Oregon, because we all know the way the world's going. I mean, how shocked would you be if Deion pulled off the upset here in Eugene?
I'm done being shocked by Deion. I'm not kidding you, guy. I went to the TCU game, and the night before I'm with some writers, and we actually made the analogy of, like, could this be like the Bishop Sycamore game? Like, that's how little confidence I had in Colorado. And then, saw what they came out and did. So I'm not going to rule them out. Now, it wasn't first of all, Travis Hunter injury is a big deal because they have other receivers, but he's, lockdown cornerback, and you're going against Oregon. Troy Franklin's a great receiver. So that's a I wish we were seeing them at full strength. But yeah, it would be, I think most of us expect this is the week where they go down. But if he pulls it off again, man, the story just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And by the way, the following week against USC at home, if they win this game, it's gonna be like a higher TV rating than the college football playoff. It's just gonna be insane.
I'm like, is there someone more famous that can show up at the game besides The Rock? Like, They already had The Rock, already came for the Colorado State game. I don't know, how do you get more famous? Like, Oprah is gonna be there? I don't know. But Stu, you just realized
Beyonce is gonna do the halftime show.
Stewart, you realize what you just did. You know that Deion has people who are just surfing the internet all day looking for bulletin board material, and you saying that you and the fellow writers thought this could be a Bishop Sycamore situation.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have admitted that out loud.
You just made it personal, as Deion would say.